This video is made for entertainment purposes only. I performed surgery on a Sasquatch in the fall of 1987. I saved its life. And for that act of mercy, the United States government destroyed mine. My name is Dr. Thomas Brennan. For 32 years, I kept this story locked away, buried under layers of fear and forced silence. But I'm 73 years old now. My wife passed 2 years ago. My children have families of their own, far from the shadow that's followed me all these decades. And the men who threatened me? Most of them are dead or too old to care. So I'm going to tell you what happened. Not because I want attention. Not because I expect you to believe me. But because some truths, no matter how dangerous, deserve to be spoken before they're lost forever. This is that truth. In 1987, I was 45 years old and had been practicing medicine in the small town of Bridger Creek, Montana, for nearly 20 years. Bridger Creek wasn't much. Population 1,200 on a good day, nestled in a valley surrounded by dense pine forests and mountain ridges that seemed to swallow the sky. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where your business was everyone's business, and where a handshake still meant something. I'd grown up in Seattle, gone to medical school at the University of Washington, and could have set up practice anywhere. But my wife, Sarah, had family roots in Montana, and when we visited one summer, something about the quiet rhythm of rural life appealed to me. I was tired of the noise, the competition, the endless hustle of city medicine. I wanted to be a doctor who knew his patients' names, their families, their stories. So we moved to Bridger Creek. I opened a small practice in a converted hardware store on Main Street. Sarah taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. We had 2 kids, Emma and Michael, who grew up running through fields and forests, their childhoods painted in dirt and pine needles and creek water. It was a good life. Simple. Honest. At least, it was. Until that night. It was October 14th, 1987. I remember the date because it was 2 days after Emma's 16th birthday. We'd celebrated with a small party at home. Cake, a few friends, the usual teenage chaos. Sarah had gone to bed early with a headache. The kids were asleep. I was in my study, reading a medical journal and sipping whiskey, when I heard the knock. 3 solid raps. Urgent, but not frantic. I glanced at the clock. 11:47 p.m. Late-night knocks weren't unusual in my line of work. Someone's kid with a fever. A ranch hand with a broken arm. A pregnant woman gone into early labor. I'd learned long ago that emergencies didn't respect office hours. I opened the door. Standing on my porch were 2 men I recognized, Jacob Whitehorse and Dale Cunningham. Jacob was a local hunting guide, part Blackfeet, mid-50s, with a weathered face and eyes that always seemed to be reading the wind. Dale was a logger, a big man with hands like catcher's mitts and a reputation for being steady in a crisis. But that night, neither of them looked steady. Jacob's jaw was tight. Dale was pale, shifting his weight from foot to foot like a man standing on hot coals. "Doc," Jacob said quietly, "we need you to come with us." "What's the emergency?" I asked, already reaching for my coat. "Can't say here," Dale muttered, glancing over his shoulder at the empty street. "You gotta come. Now." I frowned. "Is someone hurt?" "Yeah," Jacob said. "Bad. But we can't bring him to you. You gotta come to him." "Where?" "Into the woods. About an hour's drive, then a hike." I looked between them. Jacob's expression was stone. Dale's hands were trembling. "Why can't you bring him here?" I pressed. "Or to the county hospital." Jacob stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Because if we do that, he dies. And a lot of other people might die too. Doc, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. But we need you. And we need you to trust us." There was something in his eyes, something raw and desperate, that made my objections die in my throat. "Let me get my bag," I said. We drove in Dale's old pickup truck, heading west out of town on logging roads that grew narrower and rougher the farther we went. Neither man spoke. The only sound was the rumble of the engine and the crunch of gravel under the tires. After about 40 minutes, Jacob turned to me. "Doc, we're gonna need you to put this on." He held up a dark cloth. A blindfold. I stared at it. "You're joking." "I'm not." "Jacob, what the hell is going on?" "I'll explain when we get there. But the people we're taking you to, they don't want anyone knowing where they are. It's for their protection. And yours." "My protection?" Dale spoke up from the driver's seat, his voice tight. "Doc, you're about to see something that could get you killed if the wrong people find out. We're trying to keep you safe. But you gotta play along." My heart was hammering now. Every instinct told me to demand they turn the truck around. But I thought about the urgency in Jacob's voice, the fear in Dale's eyes. Someone was hurt. Badly. And for reasons I didn't understand, I was the only one who could help. I took the blindfold. "All right," I said. "But when this is over, you're going to tell me everything." Jacob nodded. "Deal." I tied the cloth over my eyes. The world went black. We drove for another 20 minutes, the truck bouncing over what felt like a rough trail. Then we stopped. I heard the doors open, felt hands guide me out of the cab. "Watch your step," Jacob said. We walked. I could feel pine needles under my boots, hear the whisper of wind through trees. The air was cold and smelled of earth and sap and something else, something faintly coppery. Blood. After what felt like 15 minutes, we stopped. "Okay, Doc," Jacob said softly. "I'm gonna take the blindfold off. But before I do, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "No matter what you see, you stay calm. You don't run. You don't scream. You do your job. Understood?" My mouth was dry. Understood. He untied the blindfold. And I saw it. We were in a small clearing, surrounded by towering pines. A fire burned low in a ring of stones, casting flickering orange light across the scene. There were 5 people standing around the fire. I recognized 3 of them, locals, hunters, people I'd treated over the years. They looked at me with a mixture of relief and apprehension. But I barely noticed them. Because lying on the ground, on a makeshift bed of blankets and tarps, was the patient. It was massive. Easily 8 feet tall, even lying down. Its body was covered in dark, matted fur, reddish-brown in the firelight, streaked with mud and blood. Its chest rose and fell in shallow, labored breaths. One of its legs was wrapped in crude bandages, already soaked through with blood. Its face. God, its face. It looked almost human. The bone structure was heavy, the brow ridge pronounced, but the eyes, half open, glazed with pain, were unmistakably intelligent. Aware. I stood frozen, my medical bag hanging uselessly from my hand. Jacob stepped beside me. "Doc," he said quietly, "this is why we brought you here." I couldn't speak. My brain was screaming at me that this wasn't real, that I was hallucinating, that I'd fallen asleep in my study and this was some fever dream brought on by too much whiskey and too little sleep. But the smell was real. The blood was real. The creature's eyes shifted, focusing on me. And in that moment I knew. This was no dream. "What?" I managed. "What is it?" "Sasquatch," Jacob said simply. "His people call themselves the Kanai. We've known about them for generations. Some of us, anyway. We protect them. Keep their secret." "This isn't possible," I whispered. "Document." Dale's voice was firm. "You can have your existential crisis later. Right now, he's dying. Gunshot wound to the leg. Infections setting in. We've done what we can, but it's not enough. You're a surgeon. You can save him." I looked down at the creature, the Sasquatch, and saw the wound more clearly now. The bandages were soaked through, and I could see the dark, swollen edges of infected tissue around the entry wound. Gunshot. Close range. The bullet had likely shattered bone. My training kicked in. I knelt beside the creature, setting down my bag. Its eyes tracked me, and I saw fear there. Pain. But also something else. Hope. "All right," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm going to need light, clean water, and everyone needs to step back and give me room to work. Jacob nodded. You got it, document. I opened my bag and got to work. The first thing I did was assess the wound. I peeled back the blood-soaked bandages carefully, my hands trembling despite years of training that had taught me to stay calm under pressure. The firelight wasn't ideal, but Dale and another man, a rancher named Pete Larson, rigged up 2 battery-powered lanterns and positioned them overhead. The wound was worse than I'd feared. The bullet had entered the outer thigh, shattering the femur and tearing through muscle tissue before lodging somewhere deep. The surrounding flesh was hot to the touch, swollen and discolored, classic signs of infection. If this had been a human patient, I'd have insisted on immediate hospitalization, X-rays, for antibiotics, a surgical suite. But this wasn't a hospital. And this wasn't a human. How long ago was he shot? I asked. 4 days, Jacob said. 4 days? Jesus. Why didn't you bring him to me sooner? We tried to handle it ourselves. Thought we could clean the wound, stop the bleeding. But it got worse. Yesterday, he started running a fever. This morning, he could barely move. I looked at the creature's face. Its eyes were half closed, its breathing shallow and rapid. Fever. Fuck. Sepsis setting in. If I didn't operate soon, it would die. I need to remove the bullet and debride the infected tissue, I said. But I don't have anesthesia. Not enough for something this size. Will he survive without it? Dale asked. I don't know. The pain could send him into shock. Or he could fight me and tear the wound open worse. Jacob knelt beside the Sasquatch's head and spoke in a low, rhythmic language I didn't recognize. The creature's eyes opened slightly, focusing on Jacob. It made a sound, a deep, rumbling vocalization that wasn't quite a growl, more like a response. Jacob placed his hand gently on the creature's massive shoulder. He understands, Jacob said. He knows you're trying to help. He'll stay still. I stared. He understands. More than you think. I swallowed hard and nodded. All right. Let's do this. I started by irrigating the wound with the clean water they'd boiled over the fire. The creature flinched, its muscles tensing, but it didn't pull away. I could see its jaw clenched, teeth, large, powerful, but blunt like a human's, grinding together. I'm sorry, I whispered, not sure if it could understand me. I know it hurts. I worked quickly, using forceps to explore the wound channel. The bullet was deep, lodged against the fractured femur. Every movement caused fresh blood to well up, dark and sluggish. The creature's breathing grew harsher, its chest heaving. Sweat, yes, sweat, just like a human, beaded on its forehead. Hold on, I murmured. Just hold on. I found the bullet. A rifle round, deformed from impact. I gripped it with the forceps and began to extract it, millimeter by millimeter, trying not to cause more damage to the surrounding tissue. The creature let out a sound, low, guttural, full of agony, but it didn't move. Almost there, I said. Almost. The bullet came free. I held it up in the firelight, a small, twisted piece of metal that had caused so much destruction. Then I tossed it aside and focused on the real work, cleaning out the infected tissue. This was the brutal part. I had to cut away necrotic muscle, remove debris, scrub the wound clean. It was ugly, bloody work, and every second of it had to be causing unimaginable pain. But the creature stayed still. Its eyes were locked on mine now, wide and dark and filled with something I can only describe as trust. I've been a doctor for over 50 years. I've seen a lot of suffering. But I've never forgotten the look in those eyes. It took over 2 hours. By the time I finished debriding the wound, irrigating it again, and packing it with clean gauze soaked in antiseptic, my hands were shaking from exhaustion. I had no sutures strong enough to close a wound that size, so I used field dressings, wrapping the leg tightly to hold everything in place. I've done what I can, I said, sitting back on my heels. The infection should start to clear if we keep the wound clean and change the dressing twice a day. But I can't guarantee anything. It's physiology. I don't know how it will respond. Jacob nodded. You did good, document. I looked down at the Sasquatch. Its breathing was slower now, more regular. The fever flush in its skin seemed less pronounced. It was still in pain, I could see that, but the immediate crisis had passed. He needs antibiotics, I said. I have some in my bag, but not enough for a course of treatment. I'll need to get more from my office. We'll handle it, Dale said. Just tell us what you need. I wrote out a list of medications and dosages, adjusting the amounts based on the creature's estimated body weight, somewhere north of 600 pounds, I guessed. As I packed up my instruments, the Sasquatch's hand moved. It was slow, deliberate. The hand, huge, covered in coarse hair, with thick fingers and nails more like flattened claws, reached out and touched my arm. I froze. The creature's eyes met mine, and then, with tremendous effort, it spoke. The sound was deep, resonant, shaped by a vocal structure not quite human. But the word was unmistakable. Thank you. My breath caught. It could speak. Not just understand. It could speak. I looked at Jacob, who was smiling faintly. Told you, he said. More than you think. They blindfolded me again for the journey back. I sat in the truck bed this time, my mind reeling, trying to process what I'd just experienced. A Sasquatch. A living, breathing, intelligent Sasquatch. It wasn't just some unknown primate. It was a person. When we reached the outskirts of Bridger Creek, Jacob removed the blindfold. Doc, he said, his voice serious. You can't tell anyone about this. Not your wife. Not your kids. No one. Why? I asked, though I thought I already knew the answer. Because if the government finds out, they'll come. And they won't come to help. They'll come to take him. Study him. Dissect him. Or worse. There are people in this world who'd see the Kanai as a threat. Something to be controlled. Or eliminated. But. No buts. Document. You saved a life tonight. A good life. One of the last of his kind. But if you talk, you'll put him in danger. And you'll put yourself in danger too. Dale nodded grimly. They'll come after you, document. To silence you. To make sure the secret stays buried. I looked between them. How many people know about this? In Bridger Creek? Maybe a dozen. Families that have been here for generations. We've kept the secret for over 100 years. And we'll keep it as long as we have to. I thought about the creature's hand on my arm. The word it had spoken. Thank you. All right, I said. I won't say anything. Jacob clasped my shoulder. I knew we could trust you. For 3 weeks, everything seemed normal. I went back to my practice. Saw patients. Delivered a baby. Set a broken wrist. Prescribed antibiotics for strep throat. Sarah asked me once why I seemed distracted, and I told her I was just tired. At night, I dreamed of the clearing. The firelight. The Sasquatch's eyes. Dale stopped by my office twice, picking up the antibiotics I'd prepared. He didn't say much, just nodded his thanks and left. I wanted to ask how the creature was doing. If the wound was healing. If the infection had cleared. But I didn't. Because asking meant thinking about it. And thinking about it meant risking the secret. So I kept my head down and tried to pretend that night had never happened. And then, on November 4th, 1987, 3 black SUVs pulled up in front of my office. It was mid-morning. I was between patients, reviewing charts in my office, when I heard the commotion in the waiting room. Raised voices. My receptionist, Diane, protesting. I stepped out of my office and froze. There were 6 men in dark suits. Federal agents, unmistakably. 2 of them were showing badges to Diane, who looked pale and frightened. The others were already moving through the office, opening doors, scanning rooms. The lead agent, a tall man with steel-gray hair and cold blue eyes, turned to me. Dr. Thomas Brennan. Yes. What's going on? He held up his badge. Special Agent Richard Caldwell, Department of Defense. We need to speak with you. Now. About what? Not here. He gestured toward my private office. Inside. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to stay calm. I have patients waiting. Your patients can wait. This is a matter of national security. National security. The words hit me like a fist to the gut. They knew. I led Agent Caldwell into my office, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. 2 other agents followed us inside. One positioned himself by the door. The other began methodically searching my filing cabinets. What are you doing? I demanded. You can't just. We can, Caldwell said flatly. He sat down in my chair, and gestured for me to sit in the patient's chair across from him. And we are. You can cooperate, Dr. Brennan, or we can make this much more difficult for you. I sat. My mouth was dry. I want to call my lawyer. No, you don't. Caldwell leaned forward, his eyes locked on mine. Because the moment you involve a lawyer, this becomes official. And if this becomes official, Dr. Brennan, your life as you know it ends. Your medical license gets reviewed. Your wife's teaching position gets scrutinized. Your son's college applications get flagged. Your daughter's scholarship opportunities dry up. Do you understand what I'm telling you? It was a threat. Clear. Unambiguous. I understood perfectly. What do you want? I asked quietly. Caldwell opened a slim briefcase and pulled out a folder. He placed it on the desk between us and flipped it open. Inside were photographs. The first showed the clearing in the woods, the fire ring, the makeshift operating area. The second showed blood-soaked bandages. The third showed footprints in the mud, massive, unmistakably not human. And the fourth? The fourth showed me, kneeling beside the Sasquatch, my hands inside the wound. Someone had been watching, photographing, documenting. October 14th, 1987, Caldwell said. You were taken into the Bitterroot National Forest by Jacob Whitehorse and Dale Cunningham. You performed surgery on an unidentified biological entity. You removed a bullet, treated a severe infection, and prescribed a course of antibiotics. I said nothing. My throat had closed up. We need your medical records from that night, Caldwell continued. Notes. Observations. Tissue samples, if you took any. Blood work. Everything. I don't have any records, I said. It was an emergency field procedure. I didn't document it. It was the truth. I hadn't written anything down. Hadn't taken samples. I'd simply done what needed to be done and left. Caldwell studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded to the agent searching my files. Tear this place apart, he said. Medical logs, appointment books, supply inventories. I want everything from October 1st through today. You can't do this, I protested, standing up. This is a private medical practice. My patients' records are protected. National Security Act of 1947, Caldwell said coldly. Amended protocols for non-human biological entities. Your patient confidentiality doesn't apply here, doctor. Not when the patient isn't human. The words sent ice through my veins. They knew what it was. They'd known all along. For the next 4 hours, they dismantled my practice. They confiscated appointment books, medical logs, supply records. They took my personal notebooks, my drug inventory sheets, even my prescription pads. They photographed my examination rooms, my surgical tools, my storage cabinets. Diane and my nurse Carol were separated and questioned in different rooms. My patients were turned away at the door, told that the office was closed for federal inspection. I sat in my office with Caldwell, forbidden to leave, forbidden to make phone calls. How long have you known? I finally asked. Caldwell looked up from the file he was reading. Known what? About them. The Sasquatch. The conai, whatever you call them. A thin smile crossed his face. Longer than you'd think, Dr. Brennan. We've been tracking populations in the Pacific Northwest since the 1950s. Mostly through indirect evidence, DNA samples from hair and scat, occasional thermal imaging, eyewitness reports that we suppress. But we've never had direct access to a living specimen. Specimen, I repeated bitterly. It's not a specimen. It's a person. Is it? Caldwell's tone was clinical, detached. It's bipedal. It has a primitive language capacity. But that doesn't make it a person, Doctor. It makes it an unknown hominid species. A biological anomaly. And anomalies need to be studied. Controlled. You want to capture them. We want to understand them. Their physiology. Their cognitive capacity. Their potential threat level. Threat level? They're not a threat. They avoid humans. They've been hiding for centuries. Exactly. Caldwell leaned forward. They've been hiding. Which means they're intelligent enough to understand the need for concealment. Organized enough to maintain secrecy across generations. And that makes them unpredictable. Potentially dangerous. I stared at him in disbelief. You're talking about genocide. I'm talking about national security. There's a difference. No, I said quietly. There isn't. At 4:30 p.m., the agents finished their search. They loaded everything into the black SUVs, boxes and boxes of files, records, equipment. My practice, stripped bare. Caldwell stood in front of me one last time. Dr. Brennan, you're going to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. And you're going to remember it for the rest of your life. I said nothing. You never treated a Sasquatch. You were never taken into the woods. Those photographs don't exist. This conversation never happened. You're going to go home tonight, have dinner with your family, and continue your life exactly as it was. Do you understand? And if I don't? Caldwell reached into his jacket and pulled out another folder. He opened it. Inside were more photographs. Emma, walking home from school. Michael, at soccer practice. Sarah, in her classroom. My blood turned to ice. Your family is safe, Dr. Brennan, as long as you stay quiet. But if you talk, if you tell anyone about what you saw, what you did, we'll know. And there will be consequences. His voice was calm. Matter of fact. Like he was discussing the weather. We'll start with your medical license. Then your wife's teaching credentials. Then your children's futures. And if that's not enough, he let the sentence hang. I understood the implication. You're threatening my family. I'm protecting national security. What happens to your family depends entirely on your choices. Caldwell closed the folder and handed it to another agent. We'll be watching, Dr. Brennan. Always. One word to anyone, your wife, a friend, a journalist, a lawyer, and we'll know. He turned and walked toward the door. Then he paused and looked back. Oh, and doctor? We found the antibiotics you prescribed. We traced the supply reduction in your inventory. Very thorough work, medically speaking. The entity is recovering well, by the way. Thanks to you. My stomach dropped. What did you do? We collected it. 3 days ago. It's currently in a secure facility undergoing comprehensive medical evaluation. You captured it? We secured a valuable biological asset. And we have you to thank for keeping it alive long enough to be retrieved. He smiled, a cold, reptilian expression. You played your part perfectly, Doctor. Thank you for your service. And then he was gone. I stood alone in my ransacked office for a long time after they left. The sun was setting outside, painting the room in shades of orange and red. The filing cabinets hung open, empty. My desk was bare. Even the photographs of my family were gone, confiscated as part of the sweep. I thought about the Sasquatch, the way it had looked at me, the word it had spoken. Thank you. And I'd repaid that trust by leading the government straight to it. I sank into my chair and put my head in my hands. What had I done? I didn't tell Sarah what happened. When I got home that night, I told her there'd been a federal audit of controlled substances. Random, routine, nothing to worry about. She believed me. Why wouldn't she? I'd never lied to her before. But that night, lying in bed beside her, I felt the weight of the secret crushing down on me. They'd taken the creature. They were studying it, experimenting on it. And there was nothing I could do. If I spoke out, my family would suffer. If I went to the press, I'd be discredited, possibly disappeared. If I tried to fight back, I'd lose everything. So I did what Caldwell had told me to do. I stayed quiet. The weeks that followed were a slow descent into paranoia. I started noticing things. A car that seemed to be parked on my street too often. A man in a coffee shop who made eye contact a little too long. Phone calls where no one was on the other end. Were they watching me? Or was I losing my mind? I threw myself into work, trying to rebuild my practice. But it was hard. Half my records were gone. Patients asked questions about the federal inspection that I couldn't answer. Some stopped coming altogether, spooked by the presence of government agents in a small town where everyone knew everyone. Jacob Whitehorse stopped by my office one afternoon in late November. He looked older. Tired. They took him, didn't they? He said quietly. I nodded. Damn. He sat down heavily. We tried to move him after you operated. Thought we had time. But they came in fast. Helicopters. Armed teams. We didn't stand a chance. I'm sorry, Jacob. I didn't know they were tracking me. I know, document. I don't blame you. He looked at me with sad eyes. But they do. Who? The Kanai. The rest of his people. They know one of their own was taken. And they know it happened because we brought a human into their world. The guilt hit me like a punch. What will they do? Nothing. That's the problem. They'll retreat deeper into the wilderness. They'll avoid us. And the trust we spent generations building, it's gone. He stood to leave. At the door, he paused. Doc, whatever happens, you did the right thing that night. You saved a life. Don't forget that. But as the door closed behind him, all I could think was, did I? The years that followed were the hardest of my life. I kept my head down. I practiced medicine. I raised my children. I celebrated anniversaries and holidays and graduations. On the surface, everything looked normal. But inside, I was hollow. Every night, I dreamed of the clearing, the firelight, the Sasquatch's eyes. And every morning, I woke up with the same gnawing guilt eating away at me. I'd saved a life. And then I'd condemned it to captivity. Sarah noticed the change in me. The distance. The silences. Tom, what's wrong? She'd ask. You haven't been yourself since that audit. Did something happen? I'm fine. I'd lie. Just tired. But I wasn't fine. And she knew it. In 1993, Emma left for college. In 1995, Michael followed. The house grew quiet. Sarah and I drifted into a comfortable routine. Work, dinner, television, sleep. We stopped talking about the things that mattered. I wanted to tell her. God, I wanted to tell her everything. But I couldn't. Because the threat was always there, hovering over us like a shadow. One word, and they'd come for my family. In 2001, I retired from active practice. I was 59 years old, burned out and exhausted. Sarah and I sold the practice to a younger doctor from Billings and moved to a smaller house on the edge of town. I thought retirement might bring peace. A chance to finally let go of the weight I'd been carrying. But it didn't. Because in 2003, I received a letter. It arrived in a plain envelope, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Dr. Brennan. The entity you treated in 1987 expired on March 14, 2003. due to complications from advanced pulmonary disease. Autopsy revealed significant physiological anomalies. Data has been classified. Your cooperation remains appreciated. RC. I read the letter 3 times, my hands shaking. Expired. They couldn't even call it death. It was just data. An expired specimen. I thought about the creature's hand on my arm, the intelligence in its eyes, the word it had spoken. Thank you. And 16 years later, it had died alone in a government lab, surrounded by strangers who saw it as nothing more than an experiment. I burned the letter in the fireplace that night. But I couldn't burn the memory. Sarah passed away in 2022, after a brief battle with cancer. We'd been married for 54 years. She was the love of my life, my partner, my anchor, and I'd lied to her for 35 years. At her funeral, Emma took my hand and said, "Dad, she loved you. You know that, right?" I nodded. I know. But I also knew that there was a part of me Sarah had never seen. A part I'd locked away to protect her. And now she was gone, and that secret would die with me. Or so I thought. Last year, I was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. The doctors gave me 2 years, maybe 3. My heart is wearing out. Slowly. Inevitably. I'm 73 years old. My children have their own lives. I live alone in a small apartment in Bridger Creek, the same town where this all began. And for the first time in decades, I feel free. Because the men who threatened me are gone. Caldwell died in 2019. I saw his obituary in a government newsletter. The Department of Defense program that tracked the Sasquatch was declassified and shut down in 2015, its files sealed for 75 years. The secret is still buried. But the people who enforced it are dead or retired. And I'm an old man with a failing heart and nothing left to lose. So I'm telling this story. Not because I want fame. Not because I expect anyone to believe me. But because the creature I operated on, the Sasquatch, the Kanai, whatever you want to call it, deserves to be remembered as more than a specimen. More than classified data. It deserves to be remembered as a person. I don't know how many of them are left out there. The Kanai. Jacob Whitehorse passed away in 2010. Dale Cunningham died in a logging accident in 1998. Most of the families who knew the secret have moved away or taken it to their graves. But sometimes, late at night, I drive out to the edge of the forest. I park my truck and I sit in the darkness, listening to the wind in the pines. And I think about that night in 1987. The firelight. The surgery. The moment when a dying creature reached out and thanked me for saving its life. I think about the choice I made. And the choice the government made. Because that's what this story is really about. Choices. Human beings like to think of ourselves as rational, compassionate, evolved. But when we're confronted with something we don't understand, something that challenges our sense of supremacy, our first instinct isn't curiosity. It's control. We don't ask, "What can we learn from you?" We ask, "What can we take from you?" That creature wasn't a threat. It wasn't a weapon. It was a living being, trying to survive in a world that had no place for it anymore. And when it needed help, I gave it. But the system I was part of, the government, the military, the apparatus of control, saw an opportunity. And it took that creature, studied it, and let it die in captivity. That wasn't science. That wasn't security. That was cruelty. I've spent 37 years carrying the weight of that night. The guilt. The shame. The knowledge that my good intentions paved the way for something monstrous. But I've also carried something else. Pride. Because for 2 hours in that clearing, I wasn't a government pawn. I wasn't a tool of the system. I was a doctor. And I did what doctors are supposed to do. I saved a life. It didn't matter that the life was strange, unfamiliar, non-human. It mattered that it was a life. And in that moment, I chose compassion over fear. The government made a different choice. They chose control, secrecy, domination. And in doing so, They revealed something fundamental about humanity. We're still afraid of the unknown. Still threatened by anything that doesn't fit neatly into our categories. Still willing to destroy what we don't understand. I don't know if the Kanai still exist. Maybe they've retreated so deep into the wilderness that we'll never find them. Maybe they've died out, victims of habitat loss and human encroachment and the same government programs that captured the one I saved. Or maybe, and this is what I hope, maybe they're still out there. Watching. Waiting. Surviving. Maybe somewhere in the forests of Montana or Washington or British Columbia, there's a small band of them, living quietly, hidden from the world. And maybe, just maybe, they remember the night a human came into their world and chose to help instead of harm. I'm telling this story now because I'm running out of time. My heart is failing. The doctors say I have months, not years. And when I'm gone, this story dies with me. Unless I speak. So I'm speaking. I operated on a Sasquatch in 1987. I saved its life. The government found out, raided my practice, threatened my family, and captured the creature I'd saved. It died in captivity 16 years later. And I've lived with that knowledge every day since. I don't expect you to believe me. I don't have proof. The photographs are classified. The medical records were confiscated. The agents who threatened me are dead. All I have is my word. The word of an old man with a failing heart and nothing to gain from lying. But I'm telling you this because some truths are too important to die in silence. The Kanai are real. They're intelligent. They're persons, not specimens. And if they're still out there, they deserve our protection. Not our curiosity. Not our control. Our protection. Last week, I drove out to the forest one more time. I parked at the edge of the logging road and walked into the trees, as far as my old legs could carry me. I found the clearing. Or at least, I think I did. 37 years is a long time, and the forest changes. But there was a ring of stones, overgrown with moss, that might have been a fire pit. I stood there in the fading light and I said what I should have said decades ago. I'm sorry. Sorry for what happened. Sorry for the role I played. Sorry that my attempt to save a life led to a lifetime of suffering. The forest was silent. No response. No sign. But as I turned to leave, I saw something. Footprints in the soft earth near the tree line. Large. Unmistakable. Fresh. I don't know if they were his people. His family. His descendants. I don't know if they've forgiven us, forgiven me, for what happened. But I know this. They're still out there. And as long as they are, there's hope. Hope that humanity can make a different choice. That we can choose compassion over control. Understanding over fear. Hope that the next time we encounter something we don't understand, we won't reach for a cage. We'll reach for a hand. My name is Dr. Thomas Brennan. I'm 73 years old. And in the fall of 1987, I performed surgery on a Sasquatch. I saved its life. And for that act of mercy, I paid a price. But I'd do it again. Because in the end, the only thing that matters is the choice we make when confronted with suffering. Do we turn away? Or do we help? I chose to help. And whatever happened after, whatever the government did, whatever consequences I faced, that choice was mine. And I'll carry it with me to the grave. If you're reading this, if you're listening to this story, I have one request. If you ever find yourself in the wilderness, the deep wilderness, where the maps end and the silence begins, and you see something you can't explain, don't run. Don't shoot. Don't call the authorities. Just watch. And listen. Because out there, in the places we've forgotten, there are others. Not monsters. Not myths. Just people, trying to survive in a world that's running out of room for them. And maybe, if we're lucky, we'll learn to share that world. Not as masters and subjects, but as neighbors. I'm tired now. The weight of this story has been lifted, but the weight of my years remains. I don't know how much time I have left. But I know this. I did the right thing. And when my time comes, I'll face whatever comes next with a clear conscience. because I chose compassion. And in a world that so often chooses cruelty, that has to count for something.